Hey, I want you all to repeat after me, okay? This is going to be an engaging section. Repeat after me. I can't believe I said that. Where did that come from? Have you guys ever said that to yourself? Maybe you didn't say it out loud, but you just thought it, like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I just said that to my kids. I can't believe I just said that to my wife. Where did that actually come from? And that's what we want to talk about today. Because James, the brother of Jesus, he gave some advice as to how we can prevent those thoughts, how we can prevent those words coming out of our mouth altogether. And we're going to go back to Sunday school here, so I'm going to have some actions for us to do, okay? But first, repeat after me one more time, okay? Different phrase, but let's look at the screen. Quick to listen, slow to speak. Quick to listen, slow to speak. I see some of you whispering it because you're like, ooh, is everyone else saying it? We're all going to say it out loud, but we're going to use actions this time. Because what happens when we get in an argument with somebody? When our blood is boiling, steam's coming out of your ears, your heart rate is rising, your blood pressure, our hands start to clench up, right? We start to get frustrated. We start to get angry. So, everyone clench your hands. Thank you. Don't flex. We don't need to see your guns. Just clench, all right? Quick to listen. Slow to speak. Quick to listen. Slow to speak. That could be the sermon right there. We could just go home. Because if you can remember that when you are having an argument with your kids or with your coworker or with your employee or with your spouse, if you can remember to be quick to listen, slow to speak, then you're probably not going to damage the relationship as much as if you are quick to speak and slow to listen. Because I don't know about you, but when I'm quick to speak, when I'm quick to react, that's when I say, did I just say that? Where did that come from? Well, why do we want to be quick to listen and slow to speak? Because we want what the other person who won't stop talking wants. We want what the other person on the other side of the conversation where you're trying to be quick to listen, slow to speak. We want what they want. We want to be heard, and we want to be understood. In all conversation, especially if it's conflict, what you actually want is you want to be heard and you want to be understood. But often what happens is we want to win the conversation, right? Instead of hearing what the other person is saying and trying to understand their point of view, we're thinking in our heads, all right, what's my comeback here so I can win? What's the doozy? You're not even listening to what the other person is saying. You're just thinking in your own head, what am I going to say next? What am I going to say next? What am I going to say next? Because you're so focused on quick to speak that you're actually slow to listen. You're not actually listening. You're just wanting to speak. Because in arguments, what we want is we want to be heard or understood. We may not agree, is what we want. We may not agree with one another. But I want to know that you're listening to me. This is so key. And so if you're single, you're not married, this applies to you. If you're married, this really applies to you. If you have kids, this really, really, really applies to you. If you have parents, this really applies to you. We may not agree we might not see eye to eye, but please just listen to what I'm saying. If you must say something that lets me know that you heard me. Say something that lets me know that you understand where I'm coming from. Don't just have a comeback and put fire on fire. I want to know that you understand where I'm coming from and that you hear me. After all, I can't hear you until I'm confident that you've heard me. I'm not going to be hearing you until I'm confident that you hear me. All right, one more time. Fists. Quick to listen. Slow to speak. There's a guy named James in the Bible, and if you've never opened the Bible before, that's okay. I'm going to catch you up to speed with who James is. James is the brother of Jesus, and James was convinced that his brother was the Messiah, the Son of God. Maybe not during the life of his brother, but he was convinced that after he saw his brother die, then 3 days later had breakfast with him on the beach, that yes, he indeed was the Son of God. And James was actually a leader in the early church. He was a leader in the early church, and he was communicating with people all over that Jesus was the Son of God and that he was resurrected. That he resurrected. And that's why they killed Jesus, right? Because he was claiming to be the Son of God. It wasn't just because of who he was. It was these blasphemous claims that he was making. And so the religious leaders they went to the Romans because the religious leaders didn't have any authority to actually arrest or arrest Jesus. That would be an illegal arrest. And what they did is they went to Pilate. If you've heard Pilate before, his name, he's one of the Roman leaders who was responsible for carrying out the execution of Jesus. So the religious leaders, they wanted to get Jesus out of the picture. And so he's out of the picture, and then James comes along with other disciples, other followers of Jesus, and they just won't stop proclaiming the name of Jesus and won't stop testifying what they had seen, that Jesus indeed was the Son of God and that he was resurrected. Now, the Roman leader at this time, he passed away. The Roman leader died, and so a guy named Ananus, I believe is how you pronounce it, he was a Sadducee. And Sadducees, maybe you don't know, is they didn't believe in the afterlife. They didn't believe in resurrection, and so they were sad, you see, right? Sadducees, they were sad, you see, because they didn't believe in. That's just. I didn't make that up. That's just a joke that you'll hear over and over again. Anyhow, and so there was no authority. They were sort of the authority at that point. But just like with Jesus, the religious leaders, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, they couldn't make arrests. But there was no one to hold them accountable because the new governor, the new Roman leader, hadn't come in yet. Are you following me? And so they wanted James out of the picture. And so what they did was they illegally arrested him and they stoned him to death because they had no accountability. They had no accountability. And then the next Roman leader came in and said, you can't do that, but the damage was already done. James had been killed. And James had a nickname. Talk about bad things happening to good people. James had a nickname. James the Just, they would call him. James the Just. He was a man of justice. James the Just. And he left one letter behind for us. The Bible isn't one book, okay? The Bible is made up of 66 different books, 66 different manuscripts, and this is James. He leaves one letter behind that gets compiled into what you call the Bible. And this is what he says in James 1:19. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. And this is pretty significant in this first line. I mean, in the times that James was writing this, women didn't sort of have the equality wasn't the same as it is today. And James is saying, Jesus came to introduce something brand new. Jesus introduced a new ethic. He's putting dignity on everybody in the world. Doesn't matter where you were born, what culture you are, male or female. He was saying there's dignity with everything. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. What do we want to take note of, James? Everyone. So not just select people, not just like a minority group, not just people that you like. Everyone should be, so I stole this from James, should be quick to listen. Quick to listen. As in, your priority relationally is to be quick to listen. Your priority isn't to win the conversation. It's not to win the argument. Your priority, James would say, is to be quick to listen. Because it's what we want others to do for us, right? You want to be heard. You want to be listened to. You want to be understood. Our priority should be quick to speak. No, it should be quick to listen. And slow to speak. Quick to listen, slow to speak. The idea here is to be late when you're ready to push back or respond. You should be late. You should wait and be late before you speak. Quick to listen, slow to speak. Wait and be late before you have your response. And can I just say, if we were to take this by heart, can you just think in your own life? I can think of my own life this week. If I were to apply this in every conversation that I had with my kids and with my wife, if I were to be quick to listen and slow to speak, if I were to wait and be late with my response, oh my goodness, it would have caused so much less friction, so much less back and forths, a lot less heartache on my behalf, a lot less apologies, a lot less I'm sorry. I mean, Canadians, we say sorry all the time, but sometimes I wish I didn't have to, right? If I were just to be quick to listen and slow to speak. And if you must say something, there's a show called Ted Lasso. I don't know if you've seen it. It's one of my favorite shows. It's just finished. But he has this quote, and it's one of my favorite quotes. It says, "Let's be curious, not judgmental." Let's be curious. If you must respond, let's respond with a level of curiosity with the other person. Like kids, if you were to say this to your parents, if there's any teenagers in here, if you're to say this to your parents, you're going to have a lot better conversations when you're having a back and forth. Okay, you listen to me? Here it is. If you say, "Dad, Mom, I really want to understand what you're saying, but I just can't. Can you explain it to me in another way?" Like, you're going to destroy that argument that you're having, right? Because you're trying to understand where they're coming from. You're being curious. You're not just putting fire on fire. You're being quick to listen and slow to speak. We need to be curious in our conversations. We need to be, especially when there's an argumentative conversation happening, we need to be curious. We need to ask questions. And you might be thinking, but if I ask questions, they're going to keep talking. How am I going to get any words in? I'm busy. I got places to go. I got people to see. I'm not going to keep asking questions. Well, we need to be curious. We need to understand where they're coming from. We need to be quick to listen. Don't just ask one question, ask 3 questions. You've been around people that are amazing question askers. I mean, you just feel so valued. When people actually ask you questions because they're curious about you, there are some people in my life that are amazing at this. My father-in-law, Brian Saxby, Fiona and Kirsten's dad, he is like the best question asker that I've ever met. Dave as well, Fiona's brother. I mean, the whole Saxby family really has this art of asking questions. And when someone asks questions to actually understand, don't you feel like the most important person in the room? Don't you just feel like they actually are taking time to get to know you and get to know your point of view on things? Be curious. Be quick to listen. Be slow to speak. I mean, if parents out there, don't you wish that your kids would ask more questions instead of just yell at you or throw a tantrum? I'm speaking from pretty recent experience. Why don't you just listen? Quick to listen, slow to speak. What comes next will come easier, right? Because what I'm talking about is actually really hard to do. For me, it's really hard to do in the midst of a conversation with someone. It's hard to take that deep breath and not just try to win the argument. Because you can be right, and I'm going to talk about this in a little bit. You might be right, but you can be so right that you're going to push that person right out the door. If you're more worried about being right at each other, I'm going to talk about this, but we're not called to be right at each other. Jesus wants you to be right with each other. You can right that person right outside the door. Parents, you can right your kids right out of the relationship. Husbands, you can right your wife right out of the relationship. Wives, you can right your husbands right out of the relationship. Is it really worth being right just so you can win the argument? Just so you might win the argument, but you're going to lose the war. You've probably heard that before. It's very difficult to do. We need to be right with one another. James continues. He says, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. It's both a result and it's a decision. Anger, it's expressed differently with everybody. The way you express anger might be different. Some people just blow up. right away they blow up. You might be like me, and you just sort of get really quiet, and you walk around moping, waiting for your wife to say, what's wrong? So you could say nothing, right? Anybody with me? You just go, oh, John, what's wrong? Nothing, right? And then that might go on for a few days until you feel like you're getting the sympathy that you need to actually, anyhow. We all express anger in different ways, don't we? Some blow up, some go more inward. You might not know what you are, but your spouse or your family knows exactly what you are. Anger in this context is this. It's drawing hasty, misinformed, relationally destructive conclusions. I'll say it again. Drawing hasty, misinformed, you don't have all the information that you need, you're not curious enough, relationally destructive, you're going to destroy the relationship conclusions. The formula is this. The longer you listen, the more you'll learn and the less angry you'll be. That's sort of James' formula. The longer you listen, the more you're willing to listen to the person on the other side of you, the more you'll learn, you'll be curious, and when you stop learning, you stop growing. The more you listen, the more you'll learn, the less angry you'll be. And here's why it works. You'll be like, John, I didn't come here just to listen to some common sense. Just repeat after me again. I can't believe I said that. It's not, I can't believe my husband said that. No, this is about you. Don't think, I wish my son was here right now. I wish my husband, I wish my wife was here to hear this. No, this is about you and not the person next to you. I can't believe I said that. Where did that come from? It's about us. Okay, so this is common sense, but here it is. Everything everyone does makes sense to them. Okay? Everything, that's deep, right? Everything that everyone does makes sense to them. It might not make sense to you, but to your teenage daughter or your teenage son, it makes sense to them. To your wife, it makes sense to them. To your coworkers, it makes sense to them. To your parents, everything that everyone does makes sense to them. Everything everyone says makes sense to them as well. And if you're not a Christian, this next part, I promise, is going to be... Can you turn that off, Will? He's recording me. If you're not a Christian here, I promise this is true. And this is the attitude that we need to have. And this is why you should be in this room feeling not judged at all. I really pray that if you have different beliefs than us, or you're sort of exploring the Christian faith, that you feel no judgment. Because this is the reality. Everything everyone believes makes sense to them. And when you say the word, I don't know why they would do that, say that, believe that. When you say, I don't know why they would do that, say that, believe that, who needs educating? I'll give you a hint. I don't know. I don't know why they would do that. I don't know why they would act that way. I don't know why they said that to me. I don't know why they believe. How could they believe that? If there's something you don't know, this requires questions. If there's something you don't know, it requires curiosity. It requires education. Not quick to speak, but quick to listen. It requires questions, not declarations. You're not trying to get everyone to get your point of view. No, we need to ask questions and dig deeper and say, well, why do you believe that? Why did you say that? Why? Can you help me understand a little bit more? Quick to questions, not to declarations. There's a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. You might have read it before, but the 5th habit says this. I think this is so awesome. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. Seek first to understand the other person, and then to be understood. When we listen to reply, when we listen so we know what our reply is going to be, rather than to understand, we don't learn anything. And often, in my experience, when we reply really quickly, we're not quick to listen, we're quick to speak, it comes out of an insecurity. Like, I don't know the question, and I don't want you to know that I don't know the answer to your question, so I'm going to be quick to speak so that you don't know that I actually don't know. When we reply to when we listen to reply and not to understand, then we're actually not learning anything at all. Our frame of reference and filter is limited to our own experiences. You don't learn anything when you're not asking questions. It's all about you. It's all about your own experiences. James isn't finished yet, so stay with me. James isn't finished. He says there's a divine agenda connected to our interactions. He says this. He says, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry because if I'm calmer, I'll be more convincing. That's not what it's about. Again, it's not about winning the argument. Because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Human anger does not produce the righteousness, the rightness that God desires. James points to conflicting agendas. He's pointing to conflicting agendas. My anger produces the righteousness that I desire, right? Because you want to be right. You want to be right in the conversation. You want to be right in the relationship. You want to be the one that's right. There's a conflicting agenda. Your anger is about your own righteousness, but it's not about the righteousness that God desires. It's I know I'm right. I know I'm right. I want you to know I'm right. This is often our agenda. I want everybody to know I'm right. I know I'm right. And so I'm going to say everything I can so that you know that I'm right. And more than that, I want everybody to know that I am indeed right. Maybe I'm the only one that can relate to this, or maybe this sort of sinks into your hearts a little bit, but we want to be right. We want to be right. James suggests that that's not the right. That's not the right. You want to be right. Listen to me. This is what I said before. You want to be right at one another. You want to be right at one another. But God wants you to be right with one another. He wants you to be right with one another. He draws us into Jesus' greatest command, his great commandment. And it's, as I have loved you, you must love one another. Jesus, get this, Jesus didn't come to be right. If Jesus came to be right, he could have come for like 3 minutes and left, right? Jesus didn't come to be right. He came to reconcile or right us to himself and to one another. He came to reconcile us with God. He came to reconcile us with one another. Not to be right, but to make things right between us and God and with us and one another. If the two of you aren't right in the conversation, it doesn't matter who's right. That's the message here. If the two of you aren't right, it doesn't matter who's right. Because you know this, being right can actually make things worse. Agreed? Being right can make things worse because you want the other person to know that you're right. We need to be quick to listen. We need to be curious. We need to be asked questions. Quick to listen, slow to speak. Be right with one another. As I have loved you, Jesus says, you must love one another. As I have loved you, love one another. James continues, he says, therefore, get rid of all the moral filth. Get rid of all the moral filth. In Greek, the words get rid means to take off or to shed like a coat. So take off that coat of moral filth. Take it off. Let it go. Take it off like a coat. Self-rightness is a moral issue which can be taken to the extreme. Self-rightness is an issue that can be taken to the extreme. And maybe you haven't thought about it this way, but it can be taken to life and death issues. Because most violence often starts with the conversation, doesn't it? Most violence in our world, most violence between friends, most violence between people always started with some sort of conversation. It started with some back and forth where both people weren't willing to let go of their not willing to let go of their rightness. They wanted to be right at one another, not right with one another. And Jesus says, no. I came to reconcile you to one another. I came to reconcile you to your heavenly Father. Therefore, James says, get rid of the moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent. The evil that is so prevalent. A better word could be malice, but we don't really use that word, but it suggests a desire to harm, a desire to get back, a desire to pay back. It's that sort of culture, right? We want to get back. The world wants us to get back, pay back, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, cheek for a cheek. Pay back, get back. We have such a payback culture. But when it dawns on us that I'm trying to convince, control, or win, when you're having a conversation with someone, with your spouse, with your kids, and it dawns on you that I'm not actually trying to make the relationship better. I'm not trying to reconcile the relationship. I'm just trying to win the argument. I'm trying to take control. I'm trying to control the situation. Take it off like a coat. Take off the moral filth. You need to ask yourself, I need to ask myself, is it worth it? Is it worth it? Is it worth winning the argument to lose the person? Do I really want to win the argument that badly? Take it off. And an alternative is humbly accept the word planted in you. Therefore, get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you. Step back into the truth you were called to, which is to love as you were loved. To love as you were loved. Therefore, get rid of all moral filth and evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you. Now, this word save, we're not talking about a salvation, like an eternity. That's not what this word save is talking about. But saving you now, as in saving your relationship. Saving your relationship with your kids. Saving your relationship with one another. It's not about the eternity. It's about saving you now. It's about saving your marriage. Saving you from those regretful words. Saving you from having to say, I can't believe I just said that. Where did it come from? Saving you from different anger. Saving you from prison. Saving you from divorce. Saving you from unemployment. If you accept the word planted in you, as I have loved you, so you must love one another. If you accept it and act on it and do it, doing is what makes all the difference. Doing is what makes the difference. Don't just believe the word planted in you. Don't just believe it's all right, it's an idea to be quick to listen and slow to speak. Act on it. Do it. Because when it comes to faith, when it comes to your relationship with God, believing doesn't make a difference in your relationships. Doing, applying your faith, putting wheels on it and so you can drive it forward. That is what makes the difference. Let's put this all together. Next slide, sorry. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone, not the other person, not the person next to you, but everyone, you included, should be quick to listen and slow to speak and slow to become angry. Because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Therefore, get rid of the moral filth. Take it off. Take that coat off. Don't be right at one another. Be right with one another. And the evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you, which can save your relationships, which can save you from saying those words, I can't believe I said that. I don't know about you, but the weight of those words, I can't believe I just said that, rings so true in my heart. I just sort of have these flashbacks of moments of regret, of saying things that I really wish I hadn't said. And I wish that I could have been more quick to listen and slow to speak, to be late, to wait and be late with my response. And let's practice this hand motion again, because this is something that can save relationships. Quick to listen. Let's all say it out loud. Quick to listen, slow to speak. James says, don't settle for being right. Make things right. Let's not settle for being right, because what progress does that make? We need to make things right. We keep things right. We need to make things right, and we need to keep things right. If you're not a Jesus follower, or you're trying to figure out this Christianity thing out, and you have many questions that I probably haven't answered today, I just want to say this is how Jesus came into the world. Jesus came speechless, where all he could do is listen. He could have come as somebody that was already an adult and came and tried to be right at someone. But Jesus came and he was quick to listen. Literally, as a baby, could not speak, only could listen. And all throughout his life, for 30 years, he spent his time learning. He spent his time being curious. He spent his time with the people there where he was at, listening to them, listening from their perspective, listening to who they were, living as one of them. And when he finally sort of started his ministry on the banks of the Jordan River, people were blown away. They said he spoke with such a different authority than they were used to. Because up until that point, nobody had walked in their shoes. Everybody was trying to be right at them. They were saying, we are right, we are the religious leaders, we know best, we are going to be right at you. And Jesus says, no, I want to be right with you. I want you to be right with one another. I spent 30 years listening to you and hearing your life experiences. I want to be right with you, and I want you to be right with one another. Which is why, if you read the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, people that were nothing like Jesus liked him because he spent time listening to them. He was quick to listen and slow to speak. Quick to listen and slow to speak. Because he spent time with them, they felt understood. They might not have believed the same things that he believed. They might have lived a different lifestyle, but he was quick to listen. They felt understood. And he invited them to follow. And that same invitation is open for you. You might not know much about Jesus, but he knows everything about you. He wants a relationship with you. That invitation to follow is a standing invitation. Doesn't matter what you've done. It's a standing invitation. But John, you don't know what I did this morning, or you don't know how I spoke to my kids this morning. You don't need to. He didn't call you to get it all together and then to follow. He wants to follow him where you are at. He wants a relationship with you. He wants to be right with you, not to be right at you. So church, as we go this morning, this week, over the next few weeks, with your kids, with one another, with your coworkers, with that person that you have that argument going with right now, that whenever you think of their name, your palms get sweaty, your heartbeat raises, and you feel like you're getting angry just thinking about their name. Whatever tension, whatever conflict you have going with that person, whoever it is, be curious. Stop trying to be right at them. Be right with them. If you are quick to listen and slow to speak, it will save your relationships. And church, I don't want you to have broken relationships. As much as I don't want to have a broken relationship in my family, I don't want you to have broken relationships in your family with one another. So God, this week, that's our desire. We want to be quick to listen. We want to be curious. There are things that we don't know about one another, God, and we want to ask questions that will help us to get to know one another, to help us feel understood and to feel heard. God, thank you that you hear our prayers. Even sometimes it doesn't seem like you're answering our prayers. God, we know you hear our prayers. And we know that praying always changes our perspective. We might not see the results of our prayer right away, but we will always see results within our heart when we lay control over to you. Help us be quick to listen and slow to speak. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.